Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this 11th of February. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that easily by calling us at the Alaska Weather Information Line. It's a toll-free call anywhere in the state. You can reach us at 1-800-472-0391. As always, that information is also online at weather.gov/Alaska, and you can just exchange Alaska for Anchorage, Juneau, or Fairbanks, and localize your weather information just a little bit faster that way as well. And if you can't find what you're looking for, whether it's from the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, and their snowfall data and the river ice thicknesses, let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov. It's my pleasure to serve you any way I possibly can. Here's a look at what we see across southeast tonight. The areas in red, of course, are winter storm warnings, and from Yakutat, Cape Fairweather, and Icy Cape all the way into the northern parts of the Lynn Canal, including Haines and Skagway tonight and down through Douglas Island. We're talking about winter storm warnings, and it looks like later tonight and into tomorrow morning especially, you have the possibility of waking up to some slushy snow, maybe as much as 5 to 12 inches by the time the storm is all wound up by later tomorrow afternoon and evening. Right now, conditions are not quite as warm or not quite as cold as we thought they would be this time yesterday. So there are some question marks about how much snow is going to move in. It does look like there will be snow tonight, but that might change a little bit from location to location about how much you get. So make sure you keep up to date with your local forecast information at weather.gov/Juneau or on your NOAA weather radio. And watch for some changes here across the Lynn Canal as we head through tonight and tomorrow. We'll start out with cooling conditions, and it looks like the snow will move in fairly quickly tonight. By the tail end, though, it will quickly transition back to rain and snow and then be done. And you may even see a break in the clouds there briefly as we get through tomorrow, late tomorrow afternoon, and then again into your Thursday. The yellow shaded areas are winter weather advisories. In those areas, of course, we're not expecting quite as much snow. But for places like Gustavus and out toward Hyder, that still means you're going to get a decent amount to shovel. Those places we're probably talking about 3 to 6, maybe as much as 4 to 8 inches of snow. So plan on some changes there. Hyder, you're probably looking a little bit closer to 10, as you always seem to get just a little bit more than everywhere else. Out around Kodiak Island, winter weather advisory for you tonight from 6 o'clock until noon tomorrow. Gusts to 40 miles per hour on top of new snow. Could total up to about 4 to 10 inches all the way from Kodiak City down toward Afognak Island. And then as we look northward, not snow. Instead, it looks like cold. You've got cold air temperatures in place already, about 20 to 40 below. A little bit of wind on top of that, and that drives places like Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse all the way down to about 70 below for a wind chill index, and that's dangerous stuff. That wind chill warning will continue through tomorrow. Wind chill advisories elsewhere from Kaktovik through the north slopes of the Brooks Range, through the central and upper parts of the Yukon Valley, through Bettles, Tanana, and then out toward Norton Sound in the lower Yukon, as well as the western end of the Seward Peninsula and areas around Nome and St. Lawrence Island. Wind chill advisories mean temperatures could feel like they're 45 to 55 below, so be extra careful out there. Quick apology and a quick look at the satellite picture. This is old information. Information is not flowing in right now from our satellite. It is being worked on, but this is old stuff, so if you're looking at this and seeing Monday night, that's what's going on. We'll show this to you one time, and then we'll get on with the maps. Monday night here, and you can see this is our front that we were talking about yesterday. By now, it is pushing its way through St. Paul and heading for the west coast and working over parts of the Alaska Peninsula, and the weather system that is moving into southeast, well, yesterday it wasn't there, now it is. So here's where we are today, and this is current. Low pressure sitting across the Yukon at 1,007 millibars, dragging that next round of cold air into northern parts of southeast. That combined with Gulf moisture, setting the stage for a quick round of rain and snow to move through, and then changing to all snow as we head into the overnight hours. Low pressure sitting just south of the Shumagon Islands and Sand Points, holding around 1,004 millibars. That's creating some blustery conditions there across the Alaska Peninsula this afternoon and this evening. Out toward Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, a little bit of light rain there. And then a new weather player out in the western end of the Aleutians at 965 millibars, keeping the wind moving over St. Paul and St. George. And a stationary boundary there is actually fairly close to the ice edge. You'll see that with Amanda Bowen and our new weathercaster here coming up here in just a little while. Tonight's forecast shows low pressure sitting across the Alaska Peninsula at 981 millibars, a decent south and westerly flow pulling in that Pacific moisture and pointing that right toward Cape Fairweather and Icy Cape, Yakutat, and all those northern locations there across the central and northern parts of the Panhandle. Pockets of heavy rain will start us out initially overnight, but quickly change over to snow as that colder air drops in from the north. You can see areas of fog and maybe some poor visibility. It'll be hit and miss across the Yukon Valley. Primarily, the bulk of the clouds will be along and just north of the Alaska Range all the way out toward the Yukon Valley. Out west, a 983 millibar low there and a dying front moving through the Bering. That makes way for the next weather system to crank up across the western chain. Still holding out over the North Pacific at 966 millibars by Wednesday afternoon. The main focus for weather activity across Alaska will be around the Gulf and the Gulf Coast waters. 992 millibar low there just south of Cordova. And a pretty tight pressure gradient here around south central and parts of southwest. Don't be surprised to have the winds come up around the Matanuska and Knik Valley with that, as well as areas around Portage and a little bit further south toward Kodiak Island. Again, remembering that we're expecting gusts up to 40 miles per hour with some of that snow and the winter weather advisory that's just been posted. As the front moves through southeast tomorrow afternoon, the rain and snow will gradually come to an end across northern parts of southeast, so winter storm warnings will come to an end by the afternoon and evening. Skagway and Haines will be some of the latest places there to lose your warning. Yakutat again looking at anywhere from 4 to 8 inches of snow at least. Hyder up to 10. By Thursday, high pressure is pushing drier air further south into south central, the Kenai Peninsula and parts of Bristol Bay. Kodiak Island should catch a break from the snow at this point. And you'll see a little bit of a break in southeast, but another wave coming in behind that could start up another round of snow for Haines and Skagway, maybe even Yakutat by Thursday afternoon and evening. So watch for more information from the weather forecasters there in Juneau as we go. Out west, we've ignored this for a moment or two, but the low pressure system continues to strengthen by Thursday down to 957 millibars. Watch for more information about the wind here for the central and western chain, especially if you're heading out and looking for some of those crab there out across the central and northern parts of the Bering. And again, an ice update will follow here in just a little bit. Quick check of temperatures as we go into Wednesday morning. For southeast, looking at readings generally above freezing from Sitka out toward Wrangell, Ketchikan and Annette. 25 up around Haines and Skagway, a little bit cooler there. Teens for south central and the Cook Inlet region, 32 around Kodiak. For Fairbanks in the middle Tanana Valley, 25 to 30 below. Ambler and Bettles looking at 30 to 40 below. And areas around central Beaufort coast as well as Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, you're looking at temperatures that are 35 to 40 below, and again wind chill values that could be 70 below. So again, be extraordinarily careful out there. 25 to 40 below around the Kotzebue Sound region. Nome looking at 11 below. Nunivak Island and Macoriac, 33 below. St. Lawrence Island about 6 below, and 22 above for St. Paul.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your aviation weather now with low pressure in the Gulf and another front working in. We're going to see some changes out in the west and kind of a large and long-term period of IFR across the Gulf as we go through the rest of the week. Watch for IFR across northern parts of southeast to start. Marginal concerns across southern parts of southeast as we get into the morning and the afternoon. A lot of this is going to fill in. From Prince William Sound all the way down to Shelikof Strait and west through Bristol Bay, IFR will linger there and a lot of VFR from the Brooks Range down the west coast through Norton Sound and a large part of the Yukon Delta. We're going to see hit and miss, marginal concerns around the Tanita Pass region southward there. And for areas around the upper Tanana there and into parts of the North Slope, watch for marginal concerns as well. As we get into the afternoon, a lot of that will pull eastward. We'll see IFR across places like McCarthy and the Copper River Valley. But again, all that area in southeast really turns into IFR and socks in, it looks like, through most of the afternoon. Hit and miss marginal and IFR across the Bristol Bay region. Most of the widespread marginal concerns will linger around the Gulf, around that low pressure center. And low pressure is moving into the central and western chain. As that moves northward, you'll see that band of IFR push eastward fairly quickly, eventually ending up over the Alaska Peninsula as we get into your Thursday. Up north, marginal concerns drop in across the North Slope, all the way from Wainwright and just west to Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse and almost toward Kaktovik. That area will shrink a little bit as we get into your Thursday morning. Watch for IFR around the upper Tanana Valley and the Alcan border there into parts of southeast, mainly along the higher terrain, but parts of the inside passage will still be looking at instrument flight rule throughout the day, and it could include areas as far west and north as Glacier Bay and Gustavus. For Nikolsky and Unalaska Dutch Harbor, watch for IFR to set in Thursday morning with the front and then the wraparound moisture coming into Adak and Kiska and Attu very quickly by Thursday morning. You can see that spreading eastward. Here's the front working around the Shumagon Islands all the way out toward Cold Bay and Falls Pass. Marginal concerns for the upper Tanana and still lingering across southeast. Not a whole lot going on around south central Kodiak or really the west or the North Slope at this point. And then around the upper Tanana Valley, maybe up toward the Fairbanks region, you're still looking at some marginal concerns by the afternoon. Here's your pass conditions in detail for your Wednesday now. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass expecting to see VFR in the morning, maybe a lean over toward marginal concerns coming in from the north by the afternoon. For Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, it looks like we'll start out quickly with marginal weather and then quickly transition by mid to late afternoon to VFR, so things should be clearing up there. Rainy Pass going the other way, a little touch of marginal concern by the late afternoon hours. Same goes for Windy Pass, leaning over toward marginal. Isabel Pass may actually push over to an IFR. This boundary is going to be very sharp coming up through the Susitna Valley, and IFR could be a little bit further east than what we see in Windy, Lake Clark, and Merrill Pass there. Mentasta Pass also gets in under the IFR by the afternoon. Tanita Pass also right there on that line, so marginal at least and maybe heading toward IFR. Portage Pass looks to go to IFR by the afternoon, a lot of that on the Gulf side, and then Chilkoot and White Pass looking at IFR concerns throughout most of the day. Freezing levels, obviously the cold airs drop back in. The surface freezing line covering up most of the mainland there, with the 2,000 and 4,000 foot levels holding very close to the outer coast of southeast and across southern parts of the inside passage there for Wednesday morning. Icing potential is generally pretty low across the west and the north right now. Out across the west, it's building right now, heading toward the levels above 4,000 feet. Across the north and eastern Gulf, levels stretch from about 3,000 to 5,000 feet in general. Kodiak's going to have a real quick surge of icing in the morning, and then that should go away. That'll look like below 8,000 feet for a few hours in the morning, then dry up pretty quickly. And then anywhere from about 3,000 to 9,000 feet across the northern Alaska range. But again, this western edge is pulling eastward with time, so things should be improving there. The jet stream, pretty wavy stuff here. This is a very progressive pattern. We've got another surge of cold air dropping in across Alaska right now, so northwesterlies coming in across the west coast at 65 knots and 120 knots coming into northern parts of southeast. At 9,000 feet, our trough of low pressures here, northerlies screaming down the west coast, 20 to 35, but out across the central chain, equally balanced by a much stronger southerly flow here. So we've got a very progressive pattern on either side. Southerly winds building 90 to 95 knots there, and south and westerlies across southeast 45 to 60. You can see at 3,000 feet the pattern's pretty much the same. Northerlies down the west coast here 40 to 60 knots, high pressure up across the Bering Strait, and westerlies blowing in across the north slope 10 to 20 knots, south and easterlies over the chain 50 to 80. Turbulence is really going to focus out across the west. Some isolated pockets of isolated severe, generally below 4,000 feet over the chain, below 4,000 feet for considerable moderate for the Bristol Bay, all the way up into Norton Sound and Unalakleet and most of the northern Gulf Coast below 4,000 feet for considerable moderate. Amanda Bowen's back with your marine weather in just a few.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces, undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine debris coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact and the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to to get boats, larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures. And in one sense, marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and obviously a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and global international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had, being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen with a look at your sea ice edge. The sea ice has actually stopped shifting south for now thanks to those southeast and easterly winds that we've been seeing, but it looks like we could see some return to some cold northerly winds again this weekend and into next week, which may help that sea ice edge continue to push south. That's still a long way away at this point though, so we'll be keeping an eye on it over the next few days. Taking a look at winds and seas over southeast. Winds generally out of the south and southeast around 40 knots for the entire Gulf Coast, and then 15 knots over the northern inside waterways to about 40 knots for the south. Looking at seas 14 to 15 feet over the Gulf. Looking into tomorrow, winds coming down quite a bit, just 20 knots out of the northwest and west for the Gulf side, and around 15 knots for the inside waterways. Seas 15 to 18 feet for the Gulf, so coming down just a little bit over the Gulf. For South Central, today we're seeing winds pretty strong over the Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay areas down into the Barrens, 40 to 45 knots out of the northeast and north. A little bit lighter, but still fairly strong out of the Gulf, 25 to 35 knots out of the south and east. Looking into tomorrow, we see a pretty significant change in those winds coming down in the Gulf, just 15 to 25 knots out of the north and northwest. And coming down also in Cook Inlet, 10 to 20 knots out of the north, still 40 knots with that offshore flow out of Kamishak Bay and into the Barrens. Looking at the Alaska Peninsula, today we have winds generally out of the north and northwest, anywhere from 35 knots over the Pacific side to 40 knots up near Kodiak Island, just 25 to 30 knots on the north side of the peninsula. Looking ahead into tomorrow, winds coming down just a little bit, but still in that 25 to 30 knot range for the entire area. Seas also decreasing a little bit into tomorrow, 11 to 14 feet on the Pacific side, but we can see a little bit of a preview of what's coming with higher seas in the coming days. And we do see some of those higher seas already in the Aleutian Islands, with ranging from 17 to about 28 feet between Adak and Kiska today, and winds very strong going along with those seas, anywhere from 45 to 50 knots in that same vicinity out of the east. A little bit lighter further east, 25 to 30 knots. Looking into tomorrow, the most significant change that we see is with those sea heights. So we're expecting seas to come up quite a lot between Nikolsky and about Adak, ranging from 22 to as high as about 35 feet for that area for tomorrow. Winds pretty steady out of the south, very strong 45 to 50 knots in that same area for the central and western Aleutians. Taking a look at the west coast, winds generally out of the north, 20 to 25 knots, 30 knots down south. And then looking into tomorrow, winds out of the northeast, so shifting a little bit, 15 to 30 knots with 45 knots further west near the ice edge, south of St. Matthew Island. Looking at the Arctic coast, we see winds generally out of the north for the west coast of Alaska, 10 knots to about 20 knots coming out of the Bering Strait. And then along the north slope, 10 knots to 15 knots out of the west. For tomorrow, some changes in those wind directions a little bit, out of the east and northeast a little bit more, but coming down in speeds a little bit, 5, 15 to about 25 knots coming out of the Bering Strait tomorrow. Recapping our weather for today, tonight we've got that low pressure system centered over the Alaska Peninsula. That's going to be spreading precipitation into south central and the Panhandle. Remember, we have those winter weather advisories and warnings in effect for both the northern Panhandle from Skagway to Yakutat and down into Kodiak Island. So look out for plenty of snow in those areas as well as some blowing snow. Up north for the inland areas, we have mostly high pressure in command, but very cold with wind chill advisories and even wind chill warnings right along the north coast for feels like temperatures down to negative 70 degrees. So be careful out there. For Wednesday, we've got low pressure in the Gulf continuing off to the northeast, still spreading precipitation in, but it should be tailing off by the end of the day. And then we can see our next weather maker coming into the western Aleutians, and that's what's going to be bringing those seas up so much in those west central Aleutians as well as the western Aleutians. Thanks for watching Alaska TV Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.